Hello all, and welcome in. We're so glad you've joined us for one last edition of the Book Nerd Diaries. Life can be rough sometimes, so please, pull up a chair here in the library and relax for a while as we dive deep into the latest books we've crossed off our endless to-read list. Of all the words or phrases in the entire English language, there is arguably none more difficult to say than goodbye. Saying goodbye to something or someone takes just 2 syllables, and yet within those 2 syllables lies a world of meaning and emotion. It never gets easier knowing that you're leaving even a small part of your life behind, and yet it is only through taking this step that you can start to move forward. In this, our very last episode of the Book Nerd Diaries, we say our goodbyes to you, dear book nerds, as well as to the year we will soon be leaving behind. 2022 brought us a year full of amazing books that we got to share with you all here on the show, and so we hope the following clip show will serve as one last trip down memory lane before the library doors close for the last time. We'll be dropping back in for a bit at the end, we promise, but for now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Throughout history, humans have had an endless fascination with gold. In its rawest form, gold is little more than shiny dust and rock, but entire empires have been built on this seemingly innocuous resource. I don't think anyone will ever entirely understand why gold holds such importance to us for so many reasons, but I don't think that its ubiquity will be going away anytime soon. People wear gold to show their status and wealth to others, marking their seemingly elevated station in society. Many ancient civilizations throughout the world have made their most sacred religious artifacts out of gold to mark their importance and give them spiritual power. Fortune seekers throughout history have been willing to pack up everything they own and risk their very lives in hopes of finding gold for themselves. Even today, people push themselves to the very limit of their abilities in all sorts of competitions in the name of winning a gold medal or trophy. Gold rings are exchanged during a wedding ceremony to indicate the bride and groom's dedication to each other. Some people even put their money into buying gold in case some grand worldwide apocalyptic event renders banks obsolete. In our wonderful book for today, Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart, the value of gold is much more than in its beauty or its financial use. For those who practice magic in this world, gold is also a conduit through which their abilities are strengthened and channeled. With gold comes power, and whoever holds the most power holds the fate of the entire world in their hands. There's a rather well-known saying that I've heard throughout my life quite often. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I'd venture to guess that you're probably rather familiar with this saying as well, though I'm not sure where it exactly originated from. While I appreciate this optimistic view that words can't harm you, I would argue that words are probably one of the most powerful and potentially harmful tools that we possess. Depending on our choice of words, we can either offer comfort or crush someone's spirits entirely. With words, we can share our stories, or even teach people a new skill. Depending on the language you're speaking, certain words can be used to convey multiple meanings, and some languages have words for complex concepts that can't be found in any other. If you've ever played the game Scrabble, done a crossword, or written a card for someone, it's very clear that words do really matter. No one, I believe, understands the power of words more than Shiori, the heroine of our marvelous book for today, 6 Crimson Cranes, by Elizabeth Lim. Shiori is a girl who feels like she's been silenced by the crushing expectations of her station, who only learns to find her own voice when it's been taken away from her. Like many other people in this world, I happen to be right-handed. I don't exactly know how it shook out that way, but I've never been able to do tasks like writing or catching a ball as well with my left hand as I can with my right. For others in my family, however, the opposite is true. They can do everything with their left hand, but not their right. I don't know if there's some grand scientific explanation for why people tend to favor one hand over the other when it comes to fine motor skills, but it's a question that's always been fascinating to me. I've heard it commonly believed that the hand someone favors corresponds with which side of the brain someone favors. Left-brained people, it is said, tend to be more logical and analytical, while right-brained people tend to be more creative and free-spirited. Again, I don't know how much credence there is to these claims, but it's still an interesting idea to think about. In our book for today, The Left-Handed Booksellers of London by hit author Garth Nix, being left-handed is about much more than just which hand you write with. Being left-handed, in the vernacular of this story, stands for unwavering courage and tenacity in the face of mortal danger. For those of our listeners out there who happen to be left-handed, this one is for you. There are few experiences in life more absolutely crushing than feeling like you don't fit in. Like no matter how much you bend and shape yourself into the kind of person you think society wants you to be, it will never be enough. We all desperately crave approval from the people around us, almost as much as we do food and drink, but we end up ultimately starving ourselves in the process. We're only given our one life, and it's cruel to have so much of that life wasted in trying to be someone you're not. When you look in the mirror, you should see yourself reflected back, and not a blurry composite of others' expectations of you. You, right now, with all your flaws and many virtues, are enough. And anyone who truly loves you will see that too. In our book today, This Woven Kingdom by Tahira Mafi, we follow the story of someone who's been made to feel like they are absolutely nothing because of her station in life. She has to endure all forms of ill treatment at the hands of those in high society, as well as the people she works for, to a point that would crush the spirit of most. Due to her incredible strength of will and resilience, she manages to navigate her nearly impossible situation and embrace her destiny, to become so much more than she'd believed she could be. There are few words more comforting in the entire English language than home. Throughout my life, I've lived in many different places, and had to find a way to rebuild my life anew with each new roof I've lived under. With each of these changes, I've slowly gained the knowledge that home means far more than just a building with 4 walls. Home, in the end, means safety. It means a place where you can lay down your burdens for a while and simply exist as a person. It's where you are always welcome, even when you feel like you don't belong anywhere else. The marvelous novel that we'll be talking about today, Gallant by V.E. Schwab, is all about someone searching for their own home. Having been pushed around and mistreated for as long as she can remember, she often feels like a ghost in her own life. Ironically enough, the belonging she seeks might just be found in a house filled with ghosts. The concept of destiny is a very interesting thing. One of the biggest intellectual quandaries in human history, and one that shows up again and again in every form of media, is whether the paths of our lives are preordained by some grand outside force, or if we create them for ourselves through our own actions. Are we the heroes of our own stories, or are we merely chess pieces in a game we'll never really understand? I happen to believe that the answer to this question lies somewhere in the middle. Through a combination of our inborn genetic traits and unique life experiences, we may naturally be more inclined to certain types of careers than others later in life. in a way that feels a lot like destiny. Some people fit into our lives so perfectly that it's like we were supposed to meet them all along. Destiny is undoubtedly an intoxicating concept, and sometimes it's hard not to believe in it. The thing is, however, that nothing is ever completely set in stone. Life constantly throws us into situations that are completely out of our hands, but it's ultimately how we respond to these situations that matters. The road ahead may be paved, but you're still the driver, and it's you who decides which way to go next. The lovely book that we'll be talking about today, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O, is all about someone who rejects the idea of destiny altogether to write her own. She may be human, but no one, not even the gods themselves, gets to decide her fate for her. By daring to take her life into her own hands, she becomes the master of her own destiny and proves that there is always a choice. Compassion, I think, is one of humanity's greatest virtues. When someone in the world is suffering or in trouble, it's almost guaranteed that at least one good Samaritan will step forward and do what they can to help. It's easy to look at the news and see all of the awful things that are happening in the world, but for every horrible headline that makes its way onto our social media feeds, there are just as many stories of people working to make the world a better place. Some give their hard-earned money to charity. Some volunteer their precious time and resources to make others' lives better. Some people simply lend a sympathetic ear or a shoulder to cry on to someone who might be having a bad day. Although these things might not seem important at the time, it's these large and small acts of service we do for each other every day that keeps humanity from drowning in a fathomless ocean of despair. This seems like a rather dramatic statement, to be sure, but in days when hope is in very short supply, simple kindness is what can make all the difference. Who knows? Through a simple word or a smile, you may have been someone else's hero at some point without even knowing it. In the book that we'll be talking about today, The Scary Yet Ever So Charming Jacoby by William Ritter, we meet a man who has made it his job to help those in his community who might otherwise be ignored. He does not seek fame or fortune, but rather the truth, and justice for those who seek his aid. It just so happens that some of his clients are those who would be called monsters. There's nothing more universally nostalgic than a good board game. If you're like me, I'm sure that a good many family gatherings have been spent rolling dice and navigating colorful plastic pieces around a series of squares to try and make it to the end before anyone else. Everyone has their favorite games, of course. I'm a fan of Clue myself, though I'm not very good at it. But one that arguably has the most distinctive visual appeal of them all is a little game called Candyland. Though it's been a while since I've played Candyland myself, I'm sure that a lot of people can instantly conjure up images of what the game looks like. A series of whimsical candy-inspired characters can be found along the perimeter of the board, dressed as candy canes or gumdrops. And each of these characters holds court over a specific area of the candy world you're navigating through. Everyone loves candy, of course, and everyone loves a good adventure. So it only goes to say that Candyland has been delighting children of all ages for decades now. The fabulous book that we'll be talking about today, Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, evokes that exact same sense of wide-eyed childhood wonder that the beloved candy-based board game does. Beware, though, not everything in these pages is sugar and spice and everything nice. Even in the last few decades, technology has reached unfathomable levels of sophistication. Every day, we essentially carry the entire world in our pocket, with access to any piece of information we could ever need, and the ability to talk to people anywhere in the world at any time. As stunning as this thought is, however, no iPhone could ever be quite as impressive as the power of Mother Nature herself. Over the millions of years that life has existed on Earth, nature has always found ways to adapt and survive against incredible odds. Some plants and animals, for instance, can blend into their environment to ensure that predators can't find them. Some emit poisons or noxious fumes when predators approach, to detract any would-be attackers from eating them. Some predators can even imitate their prey to draw in their next meal. Scientists have spent eons trying to unravel the mysteries of the natural world, but every day they always end up finding more questions than answers. In the marvelous book that we'll be discussing today, This Poison Heart by GuilhermeBernardes, we meet a girl who takes the term green thumb to a whole new level. She was born with all the powers of nature at her fingertips, but this rare magic proves to be both a blessing and a curse. We all wear different types of masks throughout the course of our lives. When you're a kid, you may have waited eagerly for Halloween to arrive, to don a mask and dress up as your favorite character. You may have even gotten to create a mask in art class, or at home, covered with a flurry of brightly colored feathers and sequins. When you grow older, however, you also learn the subtle art of turning your own personality into a mask of sorts. People build all sorts of different relationships throughout their lives, and no two of these relationships are quite alike. Different types of relationships require different things, and so we learn to adjust how we act around different people accordingly. For example, you certainly wouldn't behave around your grandparents or your parents the same way you would around your friends. When you're at work, you'd probably treat your boss far differently than you would a customer or a colleague. When you're by yourself, you're probably far different still than you are when you're around anyone else. The fabulous book that we'll be talking about today, We Are Bound by Stars, by Kessia Lupo, is all about the importance of masks in every form. Not only does the creation of masks play a vital role in the world of the story, there are an awful lot of people going to great lengths to hide their true identities. Let's get this masquerade started, shall we? It's a tragic fact of life that people are often afraid of what they don't understand. It's a reflex that humans have employed for centuries to protect themselves from potential dangers. While this can serve as a good survival instinct at times, it can also be a barrier that keeps us from truly understanding the world around us. For instance, many traditional predator animals, such as wolves and sharks, have been portrayed in the media as the stuff of nightmares. So afraid are people of Jaws or the big bad wolf that many fear to venture into the ocean or the forest on their own. In the case of gray wolves in particular, they were ruthlessly hunted to the point where they were on the endangered list for decades, all because of fear. Some might keep a light on when they sleep because they are afraid of what might be hiding in the dark. Some might be afraid to try a new food because they might not like it or had a bad experience with it in the past. Some might be afraid to talk to someone for the first time because they may potentially embarrass themselves. Anxiety is a natural, deeply embedded part of the human condition, and there's absolutely no shame in it. Heaven knows I've been there a time or two myself. Once in a while, however, that anxiety can also be used as a fuel to help you discover something wonderful. The fabulous book that we'll be talking about today, The Earthstone by P.M. Biswas, is about two people from very different worlds who ultimately forge a friendship for the ages. They go from a place of mistrust and fear to one where they are willing to put down their lives for each other in the purest form of found family. Theirs is the kind of bond I could only aspire to, and it all came about because they were willing to set aside their fear. In the part of the world that we're located in, winters can be pretty brutal. Snow and ice can accumulate on the roads so quickly that driving anywhere can be incredibly dangerous, if not downright impossible. Temperatures can plummet to such lows that spending more than a few seconds outside can cause you not to be able to feel your face. As rough as winter can be, however, it can also be seen as a time of renewal. As the year comes to a close, families gather together to celebrate all that life has given them. Snow blankets the world, turning everything into a glittering white blank slate of possibility. The bracing cold weather outside makes it a perfect time of year to relax indoors by curling up under a blanket with your favorite book and your favorite warm drink in hand. If you're a kid, winter can have a particularly special meaning. Winter, of course, brings with it the possibility of an all-important snow day. There's nothing quite like sitting in front of the TV after a major snowfall to wait eagerly for the announcement that school has been canceled for the day. Naturally, the announcement is followed by entire days spent building snowmen or careening down a hill on your favorite plastic sled before heading back inside the house for hot cocoa. Old Man Winter can be harsh, but in some ways, it can also be sort of magical. No one in the world probably understands this better than Nora, the heroine of today's wonderful book, Winterwood by Shea Earnshaw. In Nora's case, however, the particular magic of winter is far too real. There is an episode of the rebooted Doctor Who that we adore very much, called The God Complex. In this episode, our intrepid Time Lord, the Doctor, played in this iteration by the brilliant Matt Smith, finds himself stuck in what appears to be a 1980s hotel. Before long, it is discovered that the hotel is actually a labyrinth, hosting a monster that feeds on the faith of unsuspecting victims. As the Doctor and his two stalwart companions, Amy and Rory, try to find their way out, the monster slowly starts to pick off victims one by one. First, the monster draws them into one of the hotel's many rooms, then shows them a horrifying vision of what they fear the most, as their life force is slowly drained away from them. Right before each victim dies, they utter only two small words: praise him. This particular episode has always stood out to me for many reasons, but none more so than how brilliantly it portrays the subject of faith. For each of the monster's victims, their faith that was drained from them came from a very different place. For some of these people, their faith comes from a solid belief in their religion. For others, their faith is derived from science or luck. But none of these types of faith is shown as being any less or more significant than any other. Whatever form our faith takes, we all need something to believe in to help us understand this ever-chaotic world we find ourselves in. In the brilliant novel that we'll be talking about today, Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, we follow the story of someone for whom faith is the very cornerstone of their life. What happens then when that cornerstone slowly starts to crumble? When it comes to marketing, books are usually classified by a series of time-honored genres. It's an integral, often unfortunate part of the human experience to put labels on things in order to better understand them. This phenomenon is no more obvious than it is in the world of media, and it serves as a quick way for people to seek out the stories that most resonate with them. Are there robots and aliens? Well, that's science fiction. Are there dragons and swords? Then what you're looking at is fantasy. Are there hard-nosed detectives and bloodthirsty killers? Then that, my friend, is a mystery. Pretty simple, right? Well, maybe not always. Increasingly so in today's world, you find books, movies, TV shows, and even music that defy the typical conventions of genre altogether. These chimeras of art borrow bits and pieces of various storytelling traditions and blend them together into something that is entirely unique. In my many years of reading books, there are very few that I can say are singular, as the marvelous novel that I'll be covering today, Gideon the Ninth, by Tamsin Muir, almost defies any sort of explanation I could try to give in the very best way possible. It has become a sensation to a degree very few books do these days, because it truly has no equal, and I am beyond excited to get into it. After nearly an entire year of waiting, the witching hour is almost upon us, dear book nerds. Just 3 days from when this episode is released on the main feed, it will be Halloween, that beloved celebration of all things dark and creepy. Because Halloween holds such a precious place in our hearts, we try our best to bring you only the most devilish literary delights throughout the month of October each year. In our most recent episode, we talked about the Gothic space opera Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. We also honored The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving on last week's episode of our Patreon show, The Book Nerd Hall of Fame. We love discovering the breadth of the horror genre along with you here on the Book Nerd Diaries. And as Halloween closes in, it only seems right to share with you a book that honors one of the masters. The spine-chilling novel, What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, is an updated remix of the Edgar Allan Poe classic, The Fall of the House of Usher. Though his stories are rarely gory or bloody, Poe had a way of building a sense of dread throughout his works that is absolutely timeless. For building our modern concept of both Gothic horror and detective novels, he is one of those authors who looms large in the canon of American literature, and I am thrilled to get into a book that perfectly builds on his legacy of terror. We may be headed into the darkness now, but don't worry. Plenty of tricks and treats lie ahead of us for you to enjoy. There may be some monsters hiding in the shadows along the way, but as long as you stick with us, you shouldn't be in any danger. We think so, at least. I'd like to open today's episode with this little question. Do you believe in fate? That our lives are written when we're born, and that all of us have a path we're set to follow throughout our lives? You don't have to answer, of course, but I'm sure this is something that all of us have pondered at one point or another. If fate does exist, I can say this much. It certainly has a sense of humor. Sometimes, certain events that happen in our lives seem too coincidental to be mere chance. Like everything has lined up in just the right way for either the worst or best possible outcome to occur at just that moment. On the other hand, there are other moments that seem far too sudden to have ever been planned. Like, no matter how much time you spend thinking over your choices, there are just some outcomes you could never possibly plan for. We all want our lives to make sense, but most of the time, I'm afraid that it rarely ever does. The heroine of the amazing book we'll be covering today, the magical Little Thieves by Margaret Owen, could argue that she knows more about the topic of fate than most. Fate is her constant companion throughout her life, and she depends on it in order to survive each day. It doesn't hurt either that the goddess of fortune herself happens to be one of her godmothers. There's absolutely no question that technology is an absolutely vital part of everyday life. For just about as long as humanity has existed on the planet, we've looked at the resources we've been given and invented things to make our lives even a little bit easier. From the way we gather food, to the air we breathe, and the water we drink, there's not an aspect of our world that human ingenuity has not touched. To transport ourselves from one place to another, we rely on one of the oldest inventions known to man, the wheel. To cook our food, we still look to the magic of fire. These things seem so simple, and yet where would society be without them? Nowadays, one could say that technology has become more and more sophisticated than ever. Right now, everyone has access to whatever knowledge or entertainment they could ever desire right in their pocket. You can turn on a light bulb or set your house's thermostat just with the sound of your voice. In many ways, we hold the entire world at our fingertips, and that fact absolutely blows me away every single time I think about it. In our wonderful book for today, The Infinity Quartz by Akemi Dawn Bowman, we see an incredible world where technology plays not only a big part of life, but in the realm of the afterlife as well. Many stories and legends have dealt with the possibility of what lies beyond the mortal coil, but trust me, you have never seen another like this one. If you happen to have a smart speaker in your house, you may also find yourself questioning just how much it might be listening back. With that, dear book nerds, we have now made it to the end of our 2022 review and our show as a whole. We truly do hope that 2022 has brought you a bounty of blessings, and that the year ahead treats you with kindness. Before we say our goodbyes, however, we would just like to say thank you to some very special folks. Firstly, thank you to Julie and Anthony for being our absolutely amazing subscribers over at patreon.com/bndpod. It's your kind generosity that has helped keep the lights on here at the library for the last 2.5 years, and we will truly never forget it. Just as a reminder to our patrons, we will be unlaunching the Patreon page on January 30th, 2023, so please feel free to go check out and download any content you may have missed before then, before it's gone forever. If you have any questions or need help, please feel free to reach out to me before Friday, January 27th. Our deepest gratitude also goes out to anyone who has subscribed to our show via their favorite app, left us a review on Apple Podcasts or their app of choice, or told the people in their lives about us. The only way we could have reached nearly 3,000 total downloads across all platforms is because your support helped more people find the library. Though we will not be publishing new episodes of the Book Nerd Diaries on this feed, we really do hope you'll keep sharing and keep subscribed wherever you're listening to this now. You'll never know if the muses might inspire us to create something new in the future, and if that happens, we'll be announcing it here. That should be everything for now, everyone, so please take care, and know that it has been an honor to share with you this journey through the Book Nerd Diaries. The Book Nerd Diaries was written, edited, researched, and hosted by me, Amber Wiltgen. Thank you so much to the wonderful astrofreq from Pixabay for the use of our theme song, The Grand Entrance. Any other music or sound effects you may have heard during this episode were also provided by the amazing folks of Pixabay, so please check out the show notes for full credits. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please follow us on Instagram or Twitter at BNDpod, on Facebook at Book Nerd Diaries, or via our website at bndpod.wordpress.com. If you have any comments or questions to send my way, please feel free to drop us an email anytime at bndpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until we see you again, please be good to yourselves, because the world needs you. And don't forget to support your local library.